Welcome back to 15 Minutes of Finance. My name's Brandon, a CPA, and I'm going to help you keep more of your money. Today's topic is how would I make $1 million in 30 years? And what I'm going to talk about in this topic, in this episode, is if I were to do it all again and I started at $0, that could be someone who's 40 and is behind and you go, I'm going to work till I'm 70, but I want to have $1 million and I want to be able to retire when I turn 70. Or it could be someone who's 20 and they want to retire early and they want to know that they have $1 million, plus whatever pensions or Social Security, payments that they're going to have, whatever situation you are. How would I make $1 million in 30 years if I were in your shoes, regardless of how old you are? If you've got 30 years, here's how I would make $1 million. And I'll tell you that I would be confident doing this, okay? Like, this is literally what I would do, and I would be pretty confident that this would be a good plan. So if you put this plan into action, call me in 30 years, let me know how you did, but I bet you're going to have good news that you made that $1 million, okay? I'm going to talk about a couple different things in this episode. I'm going to try to make it very tangible in terms of what would I would do, not only conceptually, but literally, how would I do it? What would I invest in? This is not investment advice for you. You should talk to a professional or you should do your own research. I'm going to talk about a couple different investment options compared to what I would do that are similar investment choices. And I'm not telling you to buy any of these things, but this is what I would do. And similar strategies have been implemented by many individuals over long-term time horizons like 30 years to great effect. So I would definitely recommend some form of strategy similar to what I'm talking about, but I'm not telling you to buy anything in particular or use any particular companies. I don't get any feedback, or not feedback's the wrong word. I don't get any kickback if you download a Fidelity account. Okay, we don't have any associations or referral links or anything like that. This is just what I would do to make $1 million in 30 years. Okay, so before I get into this, I want you to think about how hard you think it is to make $1 million in 30 years. Conceptualize first before you continue listening to me. Pause for a second. Think, what would I do right now to make $1 million in 30 years? And then compare it to what I say. Did you think you needed more money? Did you think you needed less money? Did you think you would do the same things that I would do? I think it's very, very important. If you made $1 million in an unconventional way, put it in the comments. I love to hear what other people have done and would do in the future. I know a couple people for sure that are friends of mine that would probably buy crypto to answer this question. That's not my answer, but I know that answers are definitely going to vary on this question. So I'll also say this is going to be a really simple episode, guys. Very, very impactful. This is going to be one of those episodes where this is sort of a cornerstone understanding that if you are just diligent with this type of advice, you will retire okay. You will, I promise. Okay, if you're diligent, you invest early, invest often, you will retire okay. And it's not rocket science. It's not complex investing tips. There's no crypto. There's no options trading. You don't need to start with $100,000. It really is simple to make $1 million. I know that sounds crazy, but I really mean every word. And in the next 11 minutes and 36 seconds, you're going to see how easy it is. And if you think I don't need to worry about this, I'm fine. I'll be fine. I would encourage you to rethink that. Hopefully you are fine. Hopefully you're making more money than the average person. I hope our listeners are investing more than the average person. But if you look at the median retirement incomes and wealth portfolios of individuals in retirement, let me tell you, the median retirement amount is not $1 million in investable assets, guys. It is significantly under that. And I just did an episode about averages and benchmarks across the country of how much net worth, how much investable wealth, how much income does the average person have in retirement. I'll give you a hint, guys. The average person is behind. So if you don't take this seriously, it can get away from you, but it is easy to take hold of and to put into effect actionable items to make sure you're okay in retirement or even early in retirement. You do this when you're 20, you're going to have a lot of money when you're 50. Go have fun. Okay, you can have some fun before you're too old to travel and hike waterfalls and Singapore, whatever you want to do. Okay, so doesn't matter how old you are. It's what I would do in 30 years. All right, there's two major things that I would do, and I want to start by saying this, and this is not what I would do, only for a small reason that I'll talk about in just a second. But the other funny answer to this question is, a Roth IRA is something we endorse all the time. Okay, it's tax-free growth. It's tax-free income in retirement. It's not subject to RMDs, so it gives you flexibility. It has more investable options and flexibility than something like a 401k account does. We love Roth IRAs. We recommend them to lots and lots of people. It's one of the most powerful investing tools available to people in the United States. Okay. If you invest the maximum that you can in a Roth IRA every single year, that maximum is $7,000. Over 30 years, it's $1.15 million. So kind of funny math here because this isn't exactly my answer, but even if you did nothing else, if you just maxed an IRA for 30 years, and I'm assuming a 10% rate of return, there's a lot of people who are a lot more aggressive and get more than that in Roth IRAs because they're not worried about the tax consequences year to year, right? You're in a tax sheltered account when you make trades. There's people that earn a lot more than 10%. You could be at well over $1 million, but just 10%, you're in conservative funds. You're just getting the S&P 500 market return on your investments. You're a millionaire in 30 years by just maxing your Roth IRA. So that's super, super powerful and is a great answer to this question, even though it's not mine. So now I'm going to answer the question. This is what I would do. It's not advice for you, but it is what I would do. And I do similar things. It's sort of what I am doing, and it's also what I would do in just a regular person situation with one single job, nothing crazy, no major assets, no inheritance, regular, very average Joe person in the United States. This is what I would do. The first thing I would do is make sure that I'm matching or that I'm deferring into my own 401k plan at my job enough money that my employer maxes out the match that they'll make to my 401k plan. Now, for those of you who don't know a lot about 401k plans and matching, the most common match that you're going to see is 4%. That's the simple safe harbor match. And to get that full 4%, I won't go into the specifics here, you have to match 5% of your salary. So if you defer 5% of your salary into a 401k plan, the average 401k plan in the country will probably do 4% of your salary. Okay, so I'm assuming I'm the average Joe. I'm not making egregious amounts of money here. So I'm assuming I'm making $50,000. That's it. Okay, so when I defer 5% of my paycheck, that means over the course of a year, I'm deferring $2,500. Okay, that means the match, which is 4% of my salary, is going to be $2,000. And the reason that I'm making this choice and I'm not just maxing my Roth IRA to answer this question is because free money is hard to turn down. The only thing better than free money is old money. Okay, if I could grow money for 100 years, I would pay to have that money, right? If you have that much time, you're paying money to have money would pay off in the long run because of how powerful compound interest is. But other than just adding time to an equation, getting free money is the best way to multiply your wealth. So I'm going to make sure that I'm taking advantage of any sort of company match. That could be someone in a state job or a school with a 403B. That could be the regular average Joe who has a standard 401k plan. There's 457 plans. So there's lots of different plans out there. Any plan where you're investing and you get a match, I'm going to try to maximize that match, okay? So at the end of the day, what's actually going into my plan here is $4,500. And I'm going to assume a conservative rate of return for a couple of reasons. I'm going to assume 7% on this money rather than the market rate of return, which has a historical average of 10.26%. And the reason for that is really twofold. One, investment options inside 401k plans are not necessarily completely variable. I can't invest in individual companies. I'm not going to have access to every ETF and every fund. Usually a 401k plan has between 10 and 20 options that I can invest in. So I'm going to assume maybe my flexibility, I can't have access to a super aggressive account and I'm going to get conservative returns. Maybe a lot of my investment options have a little bit of a mix of bonds, which reduces volatility, but it also will have a trade-off with long-term growth. So I'm going to assume a little bit less than that. And the second reason is that there are often, we just worked on a plan for a new client of ours. We brought the whole team in and briefed them on the new plan, but their old plan for the old company before the people we know bought the company had very, very high fees. fees, and that's not rare in 401k plans. So you'll often see an advisor charge 1% or more for the advisor that's managing the 401k plan assets. And then on top of that, the fund options that they choose for you can be very expensive, where the expense ratios of the plan, some of these that we looked at were 1.25%. So even if you were in an S&P 500 like return index, you're paying a total of 2.25 to 2.5% to be in that fund. So you're, quote, earning 10%, but you're really getting 7.5 to 8%. So I'm just going to assume more conservative. I'm going to get 7% on this money is what I'm assuming here. So in 30 years, and again, I'm being very conservative. I never get a raise. I never get a bonus. I never get a promotion. I'm just making $50K my whole life. All right. Just grinding, flipping them patties, boy. That's what I'm doing. All right. That's $425,000. Okay. 5% of your salary, only making $50,000 for 30 years and only getting 7% return. $425,000. So now I've got to make up a little bit more than half still, okay? So basically what I did, and now I'm going to look into the other side of the equation in terms of how do I answer this question, okay, is I'm going to just look at a future value calculator here, okay? So one that I pull up a lot is calculator.net, and then you can choose a bunch of different stuff. I'm looking at the future value calculator. If you just type in FV calculator in Google, it's usually the first one that pops up. And I'm just playing around with, well, how many terms do I have? How many periods? I'm putting in 30. What am I assuming my rate of return is here? And then I just play around with the numbers and think, how much do I have to contribute each year to get to the number I want? In this case, that number is $575,000, okay? I'm assuming 10% in this fund. And I'll be honest, I would be pretty confident that I can get more than 10% because I'm over 30 years. I'm very willing to take a little bit of risk. I don't care if it goes down 10% one year because I've got 29 more years, right? So I'm writing it for the rebound. I'm buying into it every year, right? I'm dollar cost averaging. I'm not worried about playing the highs and lows, playing the game. I'm just putting in what I have to, earning 10%, but I'd be surprised if I didn't actually have a little bit more than $575,000 because I do think that for someone who's willing to be aggressive and is in low cost funds in a Roth IRA, I think you can absolutely often achieve a more than 10% growth. But at 10%, I'm looking at, well, what do I have to contribute to get to that $575,000 mark at the end of 30 years? And that number's $3,500. Okay, so the amount of money that I've put in each year total is $6,000, right? I get a match in my 401k, but I'm only putting in $2,500. And in my Roth IRA, I'm putting in $3,500. That Roth IRA money of $3,500 at 10% over 30 years becomes $575,000, 729. Okay, so functionally flat $575,000. So that puts me to, at the end of all of this, $1 million. So what did I do? I did two things. Let's recap. 5% deferral of my 401k to take advantage. And you might have a different matching program. Not all companies choose the safe harbor standard, but that's the most common number you'll see. So it's a pretty safe estimate. I get the 4% match from my employer, and then I put $3,500. That's half of what I can. Just $3,500 into my Roth IRA. I invest that money. I'm a little bit more aggressive, not super aggressive with that money. At the end of 30 years, I have $1 million. That's how easy it is. Now, not everybody has $6,000. You might have 3 root canals you just went through that cost you $10,000 and you're paying off credit cards. You could have other health crises. You could have housing crises. You could just be completely strapped and living month to month. I get it. But that's what it takes. That's all it takes to make $1 million if you start investing. At the end of 30 years, it takes $6,000 a year in these investment choices. Or you could just put conservatively, just max your Roth IRA every year and you'd have $1.1 million. Okay, so now the last thing I'm going to talk about is what would I actually do? Okay, I want to be a little bit more practical here because I think there's a lot of listeners to this show and a million others where you listen and you get excited and it's like, how do I actually get started? And you could probably answer that question for yourself in like 30 seconds or 5 minutes of online Google, but a lot of times people don't do that. So I want to tell you exactly how you can do that. What I would do is I would open a Fidelity account. It's not an endorsement. You're going to get basically the same treatment with any other company, but for an individually managed account, it's just you. It's not a lot of money. I really like Fidelity's interface. I think it's user-friendly. I think it's pretty. It's a little bit less just numbers. It's easy to navigate. I like it. So I'd open a Fidelity account. I would open up a Roth IRA account. And then when I put that money in, here's what I would invest in. Not an endorsement for you, but there are a couple funds I like. I would go 50-50. I would put half of my money into the ticker VOOG. It's a Vanguard Growth Fund. Okay, it's an ETF. Expense ratio is very low, 0.07%. Historical life of the fund performance, it started in 2010. It's done 15.34% per year. And that's where I'm talking about a lot of these funds historically, if you're willing to be just a little bit more aggressive, they've done better than 10%. And I might have a lot more than $1 million, but again, I'm being conservative here. So this fund that I really like, it is factually where it is every single dollar in my account that is not invested in an individual stock. That's a stock we're watching, that we're personally investing in, me and James. This is the ETF that my money is in, okay? So right now I'm not super diversified in terms of my funds. I have a lot of different companies and different industries I'm invested in. This is the only ETF I'm invested in. I do put my money in where my mouth is here. I am literally invested in this, and I've been happy with the performance. The next thing I would do, what I would do going back, and maybe I don't work with a professional investment advisor. I don't get James's advice and expertise. I'm being super standard here. I'd put 50% of my money in VOOG, and I'd put the rest in SPY, SPY. It basically just follows the S&P 500. And if you look at the historical performance, this was started in 1993, so we've got over 30 years of data here. It does 10.24%. The historical average of the S&P 500, 10.26%. So you can see this really does monitor the S&P 500. This is going to be a little bit less aggressive in terms of the total growth that it's going to see over the course of 30 years, but it's going to be a little less volatile year to year. So if I ever have an emergency, one of the things we love about Roth IRAs is you can withdraw your principal that you've put in penalty free. You can't do that with a 401k. Okay. So maybe I needed the money in a pinch. Maybe I needed $5,000 for a new car or a medical bill, whatever, right? I wouldn't necessarily always want to have to draw a lot of money out of VOOG. It is a little bit more volatile because it's more of a lower cap growth fund in terms of the companies that it invests in this ETF. And so I wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't want to have to pull out money for a medical bill a month ago when tariffs were first announced and it was down 10 to 15%, right? That would be horrible. So I would want to stabilize my risk a little bit, and I would be in SPY. There's a couple other funds you can research for yourself that are very similar to VOOG. They're Vanguard growth funds designed to be a little bit better performance than the S&P 500. Obviously, year to year, they can under or overperform, but the long-term goal is to be a little bit more aggressive and get better returns than 10%. One of them is VOO, a little bit larger companies that they invest in compared to VOOG. Even lower expense ratio, though, it's literally only 0.03%, so it's a fraction of a percent. They also started in 2010. Their historical performance is 14% per year. And then VUG is another one that you'll hear a lot. That's a commonly invested in one for people who invest their own money. Also very low expense ratio, 0.04%. They started in 2004, so we have a little bit longer time horizon to look at performance. They've done 11.04%. So you can see a little bit less aggressive on the total return, but you'll probably get a little bit less volatility year to year. So that's what I would do, guys. I would put it ends up being 2.5 thousand, but I'd put 5% of my money in this hypothetical where I'm making $50,000. My employer matches. I would aim for very normal investments in this 401k. Can't tell you what I would do here because it would all depend on what the investment options in your 401k are, but I would aim for some sort of makeup of a mix between largely just market returns, S&P 500, and maybe a little bit of growth options within my 401k choices. And then I would put $3,500 a month into a Roth IRA. I would split my investments 50-50 between VOOG and SPY. And unless something goes wrong and history doesn't remotely repeat itself, I would have $1 million and likely a lot more than $1 million at the end of 30 years by doing that. It's only, I know for some people that sounds like a lot, but I also know I know, I see you. I talk to you in person. I've messaged you online. I've responded to your comments on the episodes. I know that I am talking to a lot of listeners who have more than $6,000 that they could invest every year, and you don't invest. You travel and you go out to eat too many times a week. Okay, I know I'm sounding like Dave Ramsey right now, but it really is that easy to have $1 million. And then the math gets more fun from there. You might be in a position, and I know some of my listeners are in this position, you could invest $25,000 a year. Now you're looking at $3 to $4 million. Okay, so the more you want to just, instead of putting $6,000, you put 12 and 18 and 24. You want to just keep multiplying how much you invest. You're going to have millions and millions of dollars when you're 30. But the point is, that's all it takes to have $1 million in 30 years. And look, time beats everything. Time beats everything. So if you have 40 years, right, you're 20 and you want to retire when you're 60, you can invest significantly less and still be $1 million. The rule of 7 means that basically in historical rates of return for the stock market at 10%, roughly your money doubles every 7 years. So if we just do some backwards math, well, if at 30 years I have $1 million, then at 37 years I'm going to have $2 million, which means in 40 years I'm going to have $2.4 million. That's a lot of money. Okay. So if I only need $1 million and, maybe I also inherited a house, or I'm also going to get Social Security, but I just need $1 million, that would be enough for me in retirement. And you start when you're 20, you only need $500,000 at 30, because in another 7 years, really it's another 10 years before you're 60, it's going to be over $1 million then. So the longer you go back, the far more exciting this math becomes. So if you're looking at this situation, especially if you're young and you're thinking, this does get me excited, but I really, truly, it's not my budget. I don't have $6,000 that I can invest and not touch for 40 years. I get it. You really only need to invest about $3,000 because you only need to get to $500,000 at age 50 for you because you're 20. And then you've got another 10 years that money's going to keep growing and is going to be over $1 million. So there's lots of excitement here to be had if you're diligent and you take this advice and you put it into motion. And hopefully this created a little bit more tangible steps of what you can do. You can follow this plan. I'm not telling you to do this plan. I'm telling you, do your own research. Understand my logic for why I would choose these funds and I would choose these investment strategies, and then do your own research and find comparable investment options for yourself. And I think you're going to arrive at similar conclusions of maybe you take an identical path, maybe you take a different path, but the investments are still at the end of the day going to perform relatively similar to each other, and you're still going to be a millionaire after 30 years because you looked at the principle of the advice and you put it into motion. Well, that is another episode of 15 Minutes of Finance, aka 22 and a half minutes of finance. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode. I hope you learned something practical today. That's what I would do, and that's how easy it is to have $1 million, to make $1 million. And over half of this money is going to be in a Roth IRA, which means you can touch it tax-free. That's awesome. That's an amazing thing that, let me tell you, based on the averages, based on the median incomes and wealth of people in retirement, most people wish they would have done this. I know a lot of people have aggressive goals. They want more than $1 million when you retire. That's great. Keep being aggressive. Keep pushing for better and better investments and be diligent about it. But if the average person could get to this spot at retirement, the overall retiree community would be a lot wealthier than they are right now based on how people's performance is going and based on how loosely they monitor their investments and they are diligent about investing early. So if you put these things into motion, you're going to be better off for it. I hope you learned something. I hope you leave a comment on a question you'd like us to answer, a future topic you'd like us to cover. We would love to do that. Studio is very close. Studio is very, very close. The room's looking good. We'll probably be posting in the next week here some updates and some progress pics on the studio. So shorts on social media, fraction, small pieces of advice you can consume daily, interviews with other professionals. They're all coming very soon. As I record this episode, my wife is painting the office in the other room. So we're getting very, very close and we're super excited. Thank you for coming along with us on this journey, and it's going to keep getting better. The advice is going to get more and more accessible to everybody. And we're going to start branching out into a lot of other areas to benefit people's financial knowledge. And we are super, super excited about that. So thanks for staying along with the ride. Give us any questions that we would love to answer in future episodes. And as always, but today, even more than most, because it's what it's all about today, if you want to be a millionaire in just 30 years, invest early, invest often. See you next time.